Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to This Week with Mr. John. I am Mr. John, and I am not the youngest spring chicken in the bunch. And I want to tell you something when I was younger that I really liked. It was a commercial. It was actually a bunch of commercials. And they would put people in these situations that they were not accustomed to, that they wouldn't normally do. And they would sit there and they would ask this question, and I'm going to actually sing it like they did. What would you do for a Klondike bar? Right? It was this delicious. We have all had a Klondike bar, I think. It's the ice cream bar with the chocolate on top, the crunchy, chocolatey coating that surrounds this delicious chocolate. And they've got quite a few flavors, from Heath Bar to Mint to Kit Kat, I believe. And so they've got all these flavors of this wonderful treat. And people would I saw a commercial one time where a guy who had never taken his dish into the kitchen, he actually takes his dish into the kitchen and then he loads it in the dishwasher, and his wife is standing there and she's in total shock because he had never done anything like that before, and he did it to get a Klondike bar. Well, I want to ask you a question. What would you do for God? Listen, we asked that question. I'm going to tell you a story about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We've kind of all heard this story about the fiery furnace. These are three guys who hung around with David, right? We talked about these guys last week, that King Nebuchadnezzar had gone around to all the villages around, and he went and got the best looking, the smartest, the strongest guys in all the other villages to bring to his kingdom of Babylon, to make it better, to grow it, to have, to just kind of have the best and brightest to help build his kingdom. It was kind of a good idea. But King Nebuchadnezzar, he had a little bit of an ego problem. Let's just say it. He builds this giant gold statue of himself. It's 90 foot tall. It's this thing. It's just a resemblance of him. And below it, there is this big furnace, right? And so King Nebuchadnezzar decrees that at the sound of the tone, boom, everybody's going to drop down and they are going to worship this 90-foot statue of King Nebuchadnezzar. So King Nebuchadnezzar, what he's done is he's basically made himself a god. And King Nebuchadnezzar decrees at the tone, boom, everybody's going to bow down and worship this. Well, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when the tone goes off, don't kneel. They don't bow down to the statue. And so guys who are praising and worshiping this giant statue that is of a god that doesn't exist, a king who thinks he's a god, they go, well, these three, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, did not bow down to you, king. They did not bow down to the statue. So you got to imagine, King Nebuchadnezzar, he's a prideful king, and he wants to know why, in a fit of anger, these three men would not bow to his statue or to him. And they said, listen, we believe in the one true God. And if we are to bow down to him, we are not honoring our God. We are honoring a person or a thing that is not a true God. And we refuse to do it. So King Nebuchadnezzar, he's getting angrier and angrier and madder. And he sits there, well, if you're not going to bow down to me, I'm going to get you. Guards, the furnace below the statue is hot. I want you to make it 7 times hotter than it is right now. So they start stoking the fire. They start throwing things into the furnace to make it hotter and hotter. And it gets so hot that even the guards who were standing outside of the statue are bursting into flames. It's so hot. It's almost like, have you ever been at a campfire and you got a marshmallow on a stick and you're making s'mores and you hold that marshmallow above the fire. It's not touching the flame, it's outside. And then the marshmallow starts to get so hot, you see it start to smoke at first, and then all of a sudden somehow it starts to turn black and even sometimes will catch on fire. This is how hot the furnace was. The guards were outside of the furnace and they're bursting into flames. King Nebuchadnezzar says, now, if you're not going to bow down to me, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you get to go into the furnace. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego have a very peculiar response. They say, listen, we are not afraid to go into your furnace because God has got us. And if we go into that furnace, God will protect us. And if it is our time to die, we will die knowing that we did not disgrace or dishonor our God. So King Nebuchadnezzar goes, okay, fine. And he sends them into the furnace. Can you imagine? The guards outside were bursting and these guys walk into the furnace and they stand there. And I imagine, have you ever tried to look into a fire and see something? It's really cool. You see the flames and every once in a while you can see something in the fire. So I imagine they're looking into the fire. They're watching to see what's going on with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're all looking to see them burn up. And every once in a while they get a glimpse. Well, they're still there. And then something really peculiar happens. As they're looking at the three men, they start, 1, 2, 3, 4. There was a fourth in the flames with them. Now, in the Bible, we're not sure who this person is. It's just obviously a person sent by God. It could have been Jesus. It could have been an angel. We just don't know for sure because there's no clarity in what the Bible says about this. But it is somebody sent by God to protect Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And after so much time goes by and they realize that they're not being consumed by the flame, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego walk out of that fiery furnace, 7 times hotter than it normally was. And it blew King Nebuchadnezzar's mind. He couldn't believe it. He was like, whoa, their God is a true God, the one true God. Listen, you guys can worship your God no matter how you want. And if anybody wants to give you hassles about it, have them come see me because your God is real. So guys, I asked you the question, what would you do for God? And we see a situation here that they put their total faith in God. Guys, when I ask you what would you do for God, I'm not saying like, I feel I should rob a bank. Right? Because God would never ask you to do something that goes against his decrees, right? He's not going to ask you to break one of the 10 commandments. So don't go, well, Pastor John said I can do. That's not what I'm saying here. I'm saying, what would you do for God? Say you're in a group and all of a sudden the conversation turns to maybe church. You're in a school setting and you start talking about church and you believe in Jesus and you know who he is. In that moment, do you sit there and have the faith and trust and just start saying what you know and how you feel about Jesus? What would you do for God? Sometimes we just need to stand up, be courageous, and trust that God is going to help us in that moment. Taking a test. Or sometimes it may be to pray for something else or somebody else. but have the courage to stand up for the one true God who loves you. So guys, verses coming up. We'll continue with Daniel. And I didn't even know Daniel wasn't in that story, but this story is in the book of Daniel. And these three guys were absolutely great friends of Daniel. So we'll talk next week. We'll continue with Daniel. So have a good week. Learn your verse. Have a good one. Bye.
The Lord is good, a refuge in times of trouble. He cares for those who trust in him. Nahum 1:7.